Welcome to the Bravely Connected podcast. I'm your host, Connie Jakab. This season, we are talking about how to build bravely connected spaces. How can you feel, first of all, bravely connected to yourself? And how can that trickle out into your homes, your community, your school, wherever you are? Let's get started. Today, I am going to share with you a secret that is going to change everything for you when it comes to human behavior. This is something that you need to know if you are a parent, if you are an educator, if you're a leader. You need to know this one thing. When we don't know this one thing, it destroys us. We become reactive rather than responsive. Are you ready to learn what that one thing is? I'm going to start it off right away with what the one thing is, and then I'm going to share with you how it applies in different contexts and why you need to know that this is important. Now, when I share this one thing, it's going to make us as humans look like real jerks. That one thing is this: a human being's goal, only goal, is to self-preserve. That is it. In other words, every human is out for themselves. Now, before we label everyone a jerk, let's unpack that a little bit and why this is crucial for us to know about ourselves and others. First of all, what do we mean by self-preservation? It means that at all costs, when I walk into a room, I want to make sure that I leave intact. So it is our natural human instinct. The very primitive part of our brain is reptilian. It is reactive. It is protective. It is going to protect us at all costs. So when I go into a room and I am going to connect with another human being, I am first of all scanning the room subconsciously, asking myself constantly, am I safe here? Is this a safe place? Physically, emotionally, mentally, all the things. I am scanning the room without even knowing. This is what my brain is doing for me because I'm a human being and that this is the way my brain is wired. Now, if I don't feel safe, I automatically have self-protective mechanisms that are going to go into place without me even knowing it, without you even knowing it. And the beautiful thing is that when we know that's going on, we can start to become aware of our self-protection mechanisms. Once we're aware of those, we can connect with ourselves, but we can also connect with others. We also know that others have that same instinct going on inside of them. So let's take lying as an example. Let's say your child or your student or your spouse, your best friend, somebody is lying to you. Now you're frustrated because they're not being honest. But this is where, again, self-protection is going into play. They want to protect themselves at all costs, which means they're going to avoid trouble. They're going to avoid getting into trouble. They are self-protecting. And so, of course, they're lying. Now, doesn't excuse the behavior. Our self-protection mechanisms will often lead us to say things or do things that really aren't great. Sometimes we will betray our closest friendships because we are preserving ourselves. Understanding that allows us to get curious about it rather than judgmental, starting with ourselves. I'm not going to judge myself for that, but I'm going to notice that. I'm not going to judge people for that, but I am going to notice and I'm going to get curious because remember, behavior is always communication. And if we allow for someone else's behavior or our own to invoke curiosity, there's a hope for connection. Last week in the Bravely Connected podcast, I talked about 4 ways to bring about change and connection. So the first one was getting curious. The second one was allowing that curiosity to lead to being empathetic, allowing that to create empathy, which then builds trust, a bridge of trust, which then builds that relationship, which then leads to change. Understanding that safe spaces are completely consumed with self-protection. This is also important to know. We talked a little bit about that last week as well. Moving from safe spaces to brave spaces. A safe space is only concerned with my self-preservation. I don't care about you. I care about, I'm going to leave here intact. I'm going to leave here without feeling rejected. I'm going to leave here without feeling like I don't belong. That's why we have tribalism. That's why we have cliques. That's why we have groups. We naturally go into a room and we get with who we feel the most comfortable with. It's a self-protection mechanism. It's not wrong, it's not bad, it's just human. Understanding that allows us to say, well, how could then I deconstruct a gathering so that people aren't leaning towards self-protection, but they can lean towards connection? When I know that it is going to be a human's natural reaction to form tribes, to form alliances. Has anyone ever watched Survivor? Or I don't know if you're watching this recently, but this new Beast games on Prime. Oh my goodness, Mr. Beast has got these games. It's like psychological uh, social experiments on what people will do. And you can see self-preservation becomes their goal. You can watch human behavior at its best. When we know these things, we can deconstruct these things and create new construction around gathering. We take down the barriers of self-protection so that they can create connection. So, what are some of those barriers that are up? What are some of the things that create that self-protection? Well, I know for myself, instantly think, well, when I walk into a room, I want to know, is there a place for me here? Now, a safe space makes it so that I'm going to scan the room and say, who here is going to make sure I belong? Don't say anything bad to me. Don't look at me the wrong way because now I don't feel safe. Like that's a safe space. A brave space is I understand that I'm responsible for my own belonging. However, there's a tension in that I didn't talk about in the last podcast. And that is a lot of people don't know how to create that for themselves. They don't know how to create their own belonging and walk into a room. We literally expect people to make sure that we feel safe. So, how are we going to create a gathering, whether that's your classroom gathering, whether that's in your home, whether that's in your workplace, or a community gathering where people walk in and they don't feel like they have to move towards self protection? Well, here is number one. You want to set up the physical space to create an opportunity for everyone to feel like they're on the same page. Now, so for a classroom, I was working with a group of grade sevens and we were working with desks. That's pretty normal, isn't it? But because of the nature of what I do, which is about creating brave connection, these students were so fragmented. They were in their tribes, they were in their cliques, and there was no separating them. So we had to remove the desks and put chairs in a circle. What that did physically was it said everyone is going to be in the same type of space. There wasn't the opportunity for students to take desks and form clusters of 6 desks all turned towards one another and facing away from the rest of the group. No, we were all going to be sitting in this circle, facing in towards each other, sitting side by side. So the physical space matters. How you set up your room matters. Does it have warm lighting? Is it cold? Is it fluorescent? Is it crisp? How does the feel of the room feel? That is going to break down whether people feel like they have to have that self-protection on or not. So you have to think, what is the goal here? Is my goal today for people to feel connected? I find circles are fantastic for that. Tables, creating tables of however many people you want around that table, if it's 6 or if it's 8, but they're facing each other. Think about how can I get people to face one another and be on the same page? I'm not a big fan of theater seating only because what am I looking at? I'm looking at one person at the front and I'm looking at the gal's hair in front of me. I'm looking at heads. That's all I'm looking at. I'm not looking in eyes. I'm not looking at faces. I'm looking at one face at the front and that's it. It's one dimensional. Where as soon as you have a circle or you have a table, it's now multi-dimensional. You're looking into people's eyes. And again, That's attunement. Attunement rewires the brain. The back of somebody's head does not rewire my brain, and it doesn't rewire theirs either. So you want to turn people towards one another. Second thing is you want to train up people who know how to work the room. Now, that could be one person. That could be you. Maybe you're the only person in the room. One of the things that I love to do is I love to not sit anywhere. I like to stand and mingle around. And when I see somebody coming towards me, I will talk to them. But as somebody else comes towards me, I'm like, hey, have you met so and so? Hey, this is Susan. Susan, this is John. Hey, did you know that John does this? Oh, that's cool. And they start talking. And as they start talking, I walk away. I'm creating connections. I am the instigator in the room that are connecting people together. And I want to train up other people to do that. Now, if you're a teacher, you can train your student leaders, those ones that kind of rise to the top. You can train students to do that. You can actually get people to talk towards one another. And this is an art that we've lost. And I have found that if I can just walk into a room and know that somebody is going to talk to me, care about me, look in my eyes, want to know who I am, well, my self-protection mechanisms start to go down. Another barrier that we can take down is sometimes when I walk into a classroom or walk into a faith community or walk into somebody's home that I don't know, we don't realize how much bravery it takes to walk in a room. We all have our perceived experiences, the experiences that have created perceptions for us on how we're walking into certain rooms. For example, when I walk into a classroom, I remember what school was like for me. I was never the smartest cat in the room, let me tell you that. I was a slow learner. I was social. I was ADHD. I wasn't your dream student. And so I walk into a classroom with that emotional memory dictating the way I'm going to interact with that room. Same thing with a faith community. Some people have been so burned by faith that when they walk into something that has a spirituality to it, they're walking into it already with a perceived notion of what that has been for them. And so, what we want to do is we want to disarm. We want to remind people that they are in the driver's seat of their experience. That means that we need to have cultural norms. One of my favorite books on marketing is Seth Godin's This is Marketing. It's fantastic. And the whole book can be defined by people like us do things like this. So, what you want to do is you want to create culture. You want to create ways of being that when people walk in, everybody just knows this is the way this classroom rolls. For example, when I do this grade 7 class every Friday, those kids know that we have a secret handshake, every single one of us. This is our handshake. And I will walk around that circle and I will shake every single one of their hands. That's what I do. That's our practice. We will greet one another. When I host different events, I will always interact with people. And then when we start, I will always share. This is going to be an interactive experience, but you are in the driver's seat of what that looks like. If you don't want to participate, here's what you can do. If you want to participate this way, then this is what this will look like. You set it out because then you're taking people's perceptions and their self-protection and you're bringing it down so that they feel safe enough to move into that brave space. You see, there's a chasm between the safe space and the brave space. If you don't want a room of self-protection and I demand my rights and it's all about me. If you want to move from that to a brave space, which is about, hey, I need to know I belong here, but I'm going to be managing me and I'm going to create that space. I'm going to lean towards connection. That's a brave space. If you haven't watched last week's podcast, please be sure to check it out. What you want to do is there's that chasm in between where these small little practices, these little barrier breaking practices of breaking down someone's self-protection will allow you to move into that. And this is why it's important for you to know that every person you meet today is going to choose self-protection over connection every single time, unless you have these practices in place. It's just human nature. It's not because they're jerks. It's because of the way we're wired. So work that chasm, work those steps, break down the barriers, and watch a bravely connected space happen for you.